I can't breathe, let me live. There's more to my life than this. When will my life be considered equal? I can't run, I can't sleep. Why can't I walk down the street? Every day it feels like there's another sequel. My life matters. Why do you see a threat? My life matters. You judge me and we never met. So
To our
much.
listening audience, we know that we're having major technology problems. Systems have crashed, but our tech team is working to upload everything, and we're going to continue with our broadcast. It may be recorded, but we'll connect the message and the conversation that we have, and you will see it today. So we are aware of where we are, and we're working behind it, so that it is resolved moving forward. With that said, I want to turn to our pastoral staff, and all I did was start a conversation that we've talked about before. And for our pastoral staff, I would love to get a 30-second response as to what you feel, where you are in this whole crisis that we are facing this past week. And after you are finished, I'll introduce our guests and we'll go from there. Let's start with our pastors and with Claudia also. Whoever will be first, let them go.
Well, I'll jump in and just say how impacted I was by the message. And in 30 seconds, I'll say a lot of what we have focused on has been institutional change, but along with institutional change, not just governmental change, there needs to be a religious institutional change within our churches. What you talked about has to become a part of our DNA. And the way that we know what a part of our DNA is through our programming and through our funding. You can tell a church DNA by where the money goes and where the programming is. And for most churches, the DNA always is centered around youth, music, food ministries. And why? Because we know that these are the things that churches need. Well, we've come to a point where this social action is what the church needs. And so it has to be a part of our DNA, has to be a part of our program, it has to be a part of our funding. So I thank you for just sharing the message and just leading the way, pioneering us forward through that message. And I'm excited about where the church is going.
Praise God for that. Who's going to be next? What's pastor? Whosoever will, let them speak.
Well, I'll speak. Pastor, I had some prepared things to say, but by the time I finished hearing what you said, I realized it's not about what others should do, but it is about what I must do. And really, I was just humbled by that. I do want to say you made a statement. Injustice here impacts us all of us globally. And I want you to know that this is not just a national thing. People all over the world have been contacting me, well, not all over the world, but have been contacting me from outside of the US. And they are saying we need to hear from our church on this because the pain is felt beyond the borders of North America. And so, Pastor, you have touched something that impacted us worldwide. And it's my prayer that through this discussion, some constructive things that will be said that will help not only us here in America, but the ripple effects will spread throughout the world.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you.
Moral outrage is always the result of a lack of empathy, systematic racism, the lack of compassion. I think about me having a black son, and that could have been the knee on my son's neck. And many have misrepresented and misunderstood Black Lives Matter. But until you place yourself as a relative of that person whose knee it was on the neck of, you'll never understand this. Pastor, you said I'm done. There are times when I'm numb. Numbed by the inaction, numbed by the action for a season that dies. I hope that we can have some sustainable change that is born out of moral outrage.
Thank you. So 3 others we need to hear from: Claudia, Dwayne, and Noah. Just chime in, however you see fit.
Claudia, go ahead, please.
I think I definitely came into today angry, scared, and even feeling a little helpless. I know what to do, or I know what can be done, but just feeling like this isn't my fight. This is white people's fight. And after hearing my pastor speak, I feel like we can do this thing again. And I feel like I have the backing and the power and the support and the encouragement to get back up again and keep doing this thing in spite of how draining it is to do the work without having any kind of support from your church. And even if my global church does not stand with me, I am so encouraged to know that my national church, and even most importantly, my local church pastor is about it. So I'm excited.
I guess I'll go, Noah. Save the best for last. There's several things that come to my mind. Pastor, first of all, I appreciate your willingness to be courageous in what you said. I think this is a moment for courage. I don't think this is a moment for neutrality or indifference. The words of the Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel come to mind for me. He said very simply, indifference is evil. He said neutrality never helps the victim. It only helps oppressors. And so we can't continue to go back. And the thing is, for me, I think we have to act right now in the crisis. I think of my Aunt Ellen, who in 1861 said, America is bearing the fury of God because of its sins against Black people. So we don't wait until things get better for some convenient season to do right. It is always a good time to do righteousness. And so for me, I just want everybody to know, I don't expect, let me say it the right way. I don't expect my church, as much as I love it, to really do anything. I have big expectations of my God to do everything. And that's what moves me. So I'm done with some things, but I'm very hopeful today. I am not in any way depressed by what's happening. I'm in God.
Thank you, Pastor. Pastor Walsh.
I'll be honest, like Claudia, not just today, I've been waking up angry. And I didn't wake up angry just this week because of George Floyd. I've been angry for a while. I might have came out the womb angry because I felt like I was birthed into a world that didn't want me. I've been saying this all week, you know, how I really feel. The African-American poet Michael Jackson said, all I'm trying to say is they don't really care about us. And that's how I honestly feel. To Esmond, to your point, I've never looked to the church to speak for me. You know, in the Bible, you know, they asked the mother what's wrong with him. She said he old enough, he can speak for himself. I can speak for myself. I don't need people to speak for me, especially when the people who are at the table and that can make the change are not making the changes that they have the power to do. And I think what's really frustrating right now, as Dr. Melly, you said, we're in a perfect storm right now. And for the first time since something like this has happened, for the first time in history since something like this has happened, Black people have not been able to congregate together at church to release some of their frustration. We got therapy. It was therapeutic to come to church, to sing, to fellowship, to cry it out, to worship. We can't do that right now, and it's making us more angry. And so I don't know when I'm going to stop being angry, but that's where I'm at right now. I'm just angry.
Thank you, pastors. Thank you, Claudia, for your perspective. We desperately need these different dimensions to complete the messaging that you hear today. And so we value all that has been said. On this panel today, we have invited some of our guests from our own membership, our own members, to join us. We have attorney David Ralph that is with us, political science, Dr. Herma Percy is here. From our law enforcement, we have Ansel Delancey and Carl Burnett are with us. We thank you for joining us in this conversation, because we know that you also bring perspective that will complete our messaging today. And so thank you for being a part of us. I just have one question to start this off, and then others will have questions, or you will just chime in as you deem necessary. If there are questions not asked directly to you, we just jump in, we just speak. And to our guests, we invited you on because we want to hear from you. The one question I have to our two law enforcement, here's the question. Is kneeling down with the full weight of your body on the neck of a handcuffed Black man for 8.5 minutes a part of police training? Can somebody speak to that?
Okay, I'll start with that. Let me give a little history of my experience. I've done 2 police academies. My first one was in Baltimore. I worked for the Baltimore City Police Department. And then I did one in Prince George's County, where I retired from, Prince George's County Police Department. The first thing that we are taught is to stay away from the head and the neck. We're never taught to hit somebody in the head or the neck. That's always the first thing you're taught not to do. So with seeing what happened this week in Minnesota, I can't believe that they would thought that also, that's part of their policy to kneel on somebody's neck. I can't believe that it is. Why he did it, I don't know. But I mean, he'll have to answer he'll have to answer for himself. But the problem that I have is the other 3 officers that were there watching. Mm-hmm. You know, he has that tunnel vision, or whatever Floyd did got him so angry to make him do that. He had that tunnel vision. But the other ones, you know, they're supposed to come and hit him on the shoulder, tap him on the shoulder or something, and tell him no. That, you know, you shouldn't be doing that. And I'll really hold them more at fault than anything else.
Wow.
Wow. And so my perspective on the question, with me, I have about 10 years of experience. I went through 1 police academy, but I also went through a specialized services training with the SWAT team. And in both schools that I went through, we were never, ever taught to put any type of pressure on the neck or the head, just like Delancey just said. Why that officer did that, from viewing that video, in my personal opinion, is I think that he took what happened and transpired between him and George Floyd personal. And that's the problem right there, is as a job, this is a job for us to be peace officers. We're supposed to enforce the law, but we're not supposed to take what people do personal. That's not our job. And what he did and the other officers did, just like Delancey said, was there was tunnel vision from all officers. And the fact that you could even see that one officer that had his knee on the neck, how much tunnel vision he had, and I don't know if anyone remembers with the video, he pulled out his pepper spray to spray the crowd with Officer Child standing in between them. That's how much tunnel vision he had.
Wow.
And that right there, in training in itself, whenever you pull out your OC, you're supposed to announce. He didn't even announce it. So that means he was going to spray his partner. So those are some of the things that I looked at in that video that were absolutely done wrong. So it falls back on training. And to me, for someone to do that, to me, it shows that that wasn't his first time doing it. And now it goes back to, if it has been seen before, was it ever corrected? Was it ever brought up?
Wow. Wow.
That is the problem that I have in that video.
So David Ralph, we saw years ago the beating of Rodney King, and the system, the legal system, letting the cops get off with it. What can we expect the outcome here? You know, is he so emboldened because he knows that even the legal system is going to back him up?
Well, a couple things. One, I think he's emboldened by the leadership, as Carl was saying, not just his local leadership. I mean, all the way up to the highest leaders of the country. When you have this kind of rhetoric that's being promoted from leadership, it brings out this kind of latent behavior. This is not the first time he did this. And let me be clear, what he did is not taught in any police academy or any kind of law enforcement technique. It is unlawful. It's the kind of force that could lead to deadly force, as it did in this case. It's not lawful. Now, what will happen, I do not know, but I do know this, that there is two sets of circumstances here, two laws that come into play. One is the local laws, you know, in the state, those laws that he's been charged with. In this case, I think it's in that state, they have something called third-degree murder and manslaughter. That's what he's been charged with there. But there are also, as in the case of Rodney King, some civil rights laws that come into play. And those laws, interestingly, were created as a result of the Ku Klux Klan, and then later became civil rights laws. I'm talking about 1983 action. So what I am hopeful for, certainly, is what you said. We need a vote. There's going to be an election coming up. So we're going to have a new attorney general, hopefully, of the United States that will be looking at this case when we vote the current president out of office.
So, Herman, 4 years ago, when we were shocked with the current White House administration, I remember you addressed the church then, and you talked about how these things started not 4 years ago, but the system that existed 15, 20 years ago, they were building for the outcome of what took place 4 years ago. From a political science perspective, give me what all of this represents to us now.
You know, first of all, Pastor, I want to thank you for this forum, this opportunity for us to talk about this issue. Because here we are in the midst of a global pandemic of epic proportions, and Black people still have to fight a different virus, racism. Racism doesn't take a break. And the death of George Floyd in the custody of police is really tearing at the very fabric of this nation's foundation. There's enormous anger right now, and you see that unfolding in the multiple protests nationwide. I want you to really think about that image you see in the video. A white male of authority with a knee on the neck of a Black man. A white male in authority on the knee of a Black man. Really symbolic to the history of this nation. You know, one thing the mayor of Minneapolis had right this week, he said, this is more than just 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a white male's knee on the neck of a Black man. This is about 400 years of the knee of oppression on the necks of Black people. You know, I thought about it yesterday. I thought about Black activists and Black writers like James Baldwin and Stokely Carmichael, and how they wrote about the historical knee on the necks of Black people. and Martin Luther King, and even the Negro spirituals that we sing in church all speak of that historical white knee of oppression on the necks of our people. So what you're seeing right now in Minneapolis is really a pattern that is much larger than this incident. And we can't really talk about policing without really talking about the history of this nation, because you can't separate it. We have to really think about the fact that police have been the face of state-sponsored violence since the beginning of this republic.
I think the word is
slavery.
terrorism.
Yes, enforcing terrorism, enforcing slavery, enforcing segregation, enforcing discrimination. And that pattern to uphold that social and political order continues today, and that is what you are seeing.
Man, I'm so glad she brought in that history, because, like, for real, this is America. You know, when the fathers of this republic penned these words, we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal and they're endowed with inalienable rights. When they wrote that, when they left and went home, they went home to slaves that they owned. And they went home to slaves that they only valued as being 3/5 of a person. So when they wrote that, we were not included in that document. This is America. And so I don't think, and I'm so glad, Dr. Percy, you brought that up, because you cannot talk about what happened today without bringing up what happened yesterday. It's all connected. This is America. They are who we thought they were.
Right, but let's talk a little bit about where police get their authority from, right? Because policing doesn't operate in some social vacuum. Policing operates within a social and political order. Okay, so for example, if you were to ask the average person, where does policing get their authority and legitimacy from? Most people will tell you the law. They operate based on the law. No, police get their authority from politics, not the law. There is a social and political order that supports what is going on. They derive their authority and their resources from political leaders. And so when we think about the strategies that as a people we need to be considering in this moment, we must include in that discussion the social conditioning of policing. We must consider the social and political order and not just the legal aspects.
Man, I am over here losing my whole mind. Dr. Percy, I'm with you. I'm over here shouting on mute like Black Girl Magic. Yes, I feel like what is so critical in this conversation about policing as well is talking about the history of lynching. And I'm so glad that you also brought up the importance of this pandemic, because everyone is talking about the global pandemic of the Spanish flu in 1918, right? But what we are not talking about is the Red Summer of 1919. Yeah. And so literally on the heels of the last global pandemic was the mass killing of hundreds of Black people across the country. It erupted in riots, and people were outraged because white supremacist terrorism was let loose once again on the heels of a pandemic. And so we are not dealing with something that is new, that white people are unfamiliar with. They are familiar with this culture of white supremacist violence. And the history of lynching with our policing culture is so critical as well, because the fact of the matter is that lynching was a social activity. It was something that they did before and after church. It was something they took their kids and their families to. It was something that they took pictures in front of dead bodies hanging from trees, made postcards out of them, and sent them around to their friends. So the killing of dead bodies and the leaving of dead bodies is something that this country literally celebrated, so that when they see it right now in the contemporary context, they do not see something that is problematic. They see something that is normalized. And at some point, we've got to get this country to be socially conditioned to the killing of dead bodies as being unnormal, as being sick, as being disturbing, as being an act of terrorism.
Wow, thank you for that. Before you come, Pastor Esmond, before you add this, don't lose your thought. I want to remind folk of two things. Number one, if you have questions or comments that you want to send in, Pastor Stephanie Grant is still managing the online site, so you can send your questions into her, and she will read them to us, those that she wants to bring forward to us. We also want to remind you that we know that we were having technical difficulties. We're still trying to resolve those things, and all that you hear today, if you're not hearing it live, you will hear a rebroadcast of all that has taken place today. Pastor Esmond?
Yeah, there are a couple of points. I just want to resonate strongly with the points that were made previously about the founding of our nation. There's certain things in the American DNA I don't think that are coming out until the Lord burns the whole thing down, personally. But until then, we still work to make a more perfect union. That's our responsibility. But let me make a couple of points. One, in the early 1900s, amid the roiling tensions of the nation racially, the NAACP comes into being, founded by Blacks and whites, coming together in anti-lynching campaigns in the 1920s to shine a light and to meet that dark cloud that is over the nation and address it. And it seems to me that at this moment, we need all hands on deck.
Yes.
It's critical that my kinfolk not just be relegated to my skinfolk. That I got people, for instance, in our struggle, people like Elijah Lovejoy, who stood up against oppression, this white brother. People like Reverend Flunder in Ohio, who stood up in front of a segregated school and died when a bulldozer rolled him over. He would not move because of Black people. So that's my brother as much as any other Black person is my brother. And I'm saying that in this moment, what's critical for us to understand is, as spiritual people, in the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass said that white religion that does not speak in moments of crisis against oppression has stripped religion and faith, Christianity, of its most beautiful part and left it a lifeless hulk just sitting on the ground. Mercy. So part of our responsibility, man, is to pick up this mantle that Christ has given us. And anybody that wants to come along, we need to step forward and do what we can to raise awareness and to heal the oppression we see. But make no mistake about it, healing that does not mean that we sit in silence when our brothers and sisters are doing wrong. We got to call sin by its name, and we have to work at the same time with people who are willing to come with us on this journey.
Pastor Williams.
I love that balance, Pastor Esmond, being in the world, even though we're planning to leave this world. Historically, prophetically, it has caused some to sideline themselves looking for a better day, meaning heaven. But while going to heaven, not planning to take anybody with them. We are living in an enigma. And the enigma is we look to this country to keep its written creed, to live up to its written creed. But the enigma is we do know prophetically this country will never live up to its written creed. In fact, it will roll back freedoms. So then, what do we do? I believe Micah 6:8 is still as relevant as ever before. He has shown us what the Lord requires of us: to do justly, to love mercy, to walk humbly with our God. We cannot be so other earthly minded that we cannot care for our brother and our sister. And so as we live in this enigma, the huge thing and the task for us is to show that justice means something to people of God.
Thank you, Pastor. Just before Pastor Washington, you come, I'm going to ask for David, Ralph, Carl, and Ansel to prepare some statements because, after we finish, warm weather in the summer is coming. And we got to get some solutions to individuals who are full of frustration. And what are some steps, what are some recommendations that can come from you that can help navigate us as a people as we prepare for a very hostile summer that's ahead of us? Pastor Washington.
So my question, statement, etc. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm still angry, so y'all forgive me. But it's to Burnett and Delancey. I want to speak now, not as a pastor, but as a black man. All right, and I'm gonna throw some salt in the game a little bit, man. This anger, sometimes it literally makes you think about going to get some help and doing to some of these officers what has been done to so many black men in America. If this was an isolated situation, this just happened once, then you say, man, this was just a bad cop. But man, just repeatedly, it's like, man, something is behind this. Something is behind this. It's almost like, man, this is too strategic. That these lynchings, these mono lynchings just keep happening and happening. The problem is when they do it, they get acquitted. If I do it, I'm getting 50 to life. My question is, man, and I guess this goes back also to what Dr. Percy was saying in terms of who manages the police. Yeah. It's like, man, who polices the police? Like I've wanted somebody, and I don't know who it was. Maybe I wanted President Obama to do this. I don't know, but it's like, man, somebody come out and talk to these forces and saying, yo, y'all forgive me. I'm asking the Spirit even right now to hold my tongue. Like, y'all stop this. Somebody, like, something is behind this that's greater than just this happening. Like, that's just how I feel. And I'm asking, man, just from a police perspective, like, what do y'all see happening in terms of how, from my vantage point, almost strategic this is when this stuff like this, this is like almost every year, another situation happens. And I'm saying, what are some, and I guess if we bring David Ralph on this too, man, like what are some legal ways that we can turn this around? It's the same situation. Black man's minding his own business. Somebody calls the police. Police shows up. He's killed in a different ways, whether it's a knee on my neck or whether just straight up a bullet. He's killed. They get arrested. There's an outcry from the people. We burn, we march, etc. And then when it goes into court, he gets acquitted. I never shall forget the first, thing that was the ripple effect with Trayvon Martin. We all remember that situation with this young man in Florida with having Skittles and an iced tea. I never shall forget. I was in Bermuda preaching that weekend, and it was a Saturday night. I was in a bowling alley. Now, why this thing came up on a Saturday night, I don't know. I thought courts were closed on the weekend. Maybe I'm thinking something else. That's when the first thing I knew, something is wrong. I was picking up my ball, Dr. Williams, to get it ready to bowl. The bowling screens went black and CNN come on. I'm in Bermuda, Dr. Brown. This is how global these things in America becoming. I'm picking up my bowling ball, and the CNN thing comes on. Mark Zimmerman comes on, and he gets acquitted. And I'm telling you, Burnett and Delancey, for the first time in my life, I was scared to get on a plane and go back to America. I was scared. I said, man, this is ridiculous. So I'm there just like, for lack of a better word or phrase, help me, my brothers. What are some legal things we can do or something to police the police or turn this around? Because if not,
there are some things that we can do, but I'm going to have the police on the panel to respond, and then I'll jump in because there are some.
Because y'all gonna see Queen and Slim happen in real life.
Okay, and what I want, and thank you all for that, because we do want to hear from everyone. But I got to manage time as we move forward.
Yeah.
So we got to be succinct to the point. And
I'm sorry, y'all. I'm just upset.
So
I'm
bullet
angry.
points. Come on, let's respond because we want to hear from everyone.
So I'm gonna touch on what you just said as far as leadership. That's the first part of it, and I'm just being honest with you. Leadership is the main part of it, and it comes from we as a people voting those people into the leadership positions. We're lacking on that. I'm going to tell you that right now. We are lacking on that. We had an incident in Prince George's County where a county officer shot an unarmed man in handcuffs in his passenger seat of his car. Our leadership did not hesitate. They did not wait. Angela Alsobrook, our county executive, along with the chief of police, responded to that scene immediately that night. A warrant was written for that officer's arrest that night. He was taken into custody that night. That is what you call leadership that shows concern for the community, shows concern for its people. We have to get in and we have to vote the right leadership into seats. We have people within agencies that become white shirts. And when they become white shirts, half of them have no real patrol experience. They come in sometimes maybe spending 6 months, a year on the street in patrol. They don't really understand how to deal with the community. But what they do is they get into a white shirt, into a leadership position, and they're telling the people underneath them how to do their job.
Okay, thank you. So we got leadership here. Yeah. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I do have to keep us moving. Okay. Leadership is a critical issue. And so you want to add a point to that? And then we'll
Yeah, not just leadership, but Pastor, as you know, we have jurors in this county, and jurors decide whether or not someone goes to jail or whether or not to go free. Because I've seen many members of Brinklow coming for jury duty.
Yes, sir. Yes, he has.
So we have to change them, on how they have to change how they look at a case to see the evidence and say this person is guilty and they have to be held accountable for it.
Thank you for that. David Ralph.
Yeah, so real quick, as many of you all know, there's supposed to be a Justice Department, and that Justice Department is supposed to police the police, to your question, Pastor Washington. That's the Justice Department's job. We don't have a Justice Department at the moment. You said you were hoping that Obama would do something. He actually did. So the Justice Department was the most active under President Obama in my lifetime, in particular the Civil Rights Division. As you know, I used to be the city attorney for Baltimore City.
Right.
We reformed the police, we're reforming the police department by entering into a consent decree with the Justice Department, the then Justice Department, to reform the police department's behavior, how they do things, their training, what is the screening process for the police officer. Because, look, we live in a sinful world, and I'll be brief, Pastor. We live in a sinful world. So you're going to there's always bad apples in any bunch. I want to be careful. Not all police are bad, obviously. Sure. Policing is a necessary thing in this world. But when your screening process allows individuals in that process that should never be policed, that have serious biases from the get-go, that are only exacerbated in a stressful situation, then you're asking for the kinds of tragedies that you're seeing now.
Mercy. Irma, you're about to jump out your seat. Come on.
I'm hot. I'm hot. Because I really want us to give some thought to what I just said about the social and political order that really legitimizes police behavior. Real quick, Any of you saw yesterday how that CNN reporter was arrested on air, that black CNN reporter?
Yes.
When he was arrested, do you recall he asked the officer, "Why are you arresting me?" And the officer didn't answer. Off camera, he asked the officer again, "Why are you arresting me?" And the officer said, "I'm just following orders." Who gave him the order? From where? It goes back to that social and political order I'm talking about, that when we think in terms of how are we going to stop this from happening again and again, we have to start thinking beyond using the legal system and the law, because they're not operating based on your constitutional rights and whether or not they're violating federalism and due process. They're not. So here are some of the practical things that we need to be thinking of, and David Ralph talked about one, and that is the consent decree. But for those of you who don't know, the consent decree was basically, or is basically, the Justice Department saying to police departments that if we find misconduct and violations of constitutional rights, we are going to run your department. So you either agree to clean it up, reform it, or we're going to run your department, right? And they sign a consent decree. I don't know if right now our lovely AV team can actually put a slide that I have, because I wanted to show you a screenshot of the United States of America, how in the different states, the Justice Department found violations of misconduct all over. So this is systematic. Now, consent decrees rose under the Obama administration, but make no mistake, they existed even before the Obama administration. Even under George Bush, they had consent decrees. However, they have been reduced under the present administration. But that's a different topic. I'm not even going to.
And there are no new ones either under this.
Right. The second thing is, I know we need to localize our protests. I love seeing the protests on TV because it puts pressure on our lawmakers. But there's a problem here. Too often we focus our protests on Washington, the executive branch. Wrong again. Where are decisions made about policing? It's in your state, it's in your local jurisdiction. It's the mayor, it's your county executive that appoints police chiefs. You can say to the police chief, "Hey, I need you to clean this up, or you're out of here, or I need to replace you." And that's what our panelist Burnett was talking about, leadership, right? We need leadership. And the leaders, the political leaders that make the decision are on the state and local level. And so we need protests. They need to be protesting City Hall, protest your state legislators, protest county executive. These are the leaders that make the decision about policing. Washington, that's not where the decisions are made about policing, unless your constitutional rights are violated, right? So for example, we know, that in the 60s, we had civilian review boards that worked very well because they simply appointed civilians to subpoena the powers of the police and hold them accountable. What happened, however? They were disbanded and defunded under the Reagan era and never revived. This is where protests needs to come in. When we protest city council and our county council and our mayor to say, bring back civilian review boards. It can't be internal review boards. What co-worker is going to review another co-worker? Especially, we know in policing, there is a subculture, a blue shield. We need to bring back civilian review boards. And so the protesting that you see needs to be more localized so that we can get things done.
Thank you, Irma. And I'm sorry, and I feel your passion. I wish we had more time, because we definitely need to hear this. We got to find another forum for it. So, but folks, we got to bring this together now. And what I want us to think about for the next 8 minutes, only 8 minutes, not 8 minutes per person, a total of 8 collective minutes. We need some closing solutions and some closing thoughts from each of you. I really need to hold you on to 30 seconds. No, I did not say 30 minutes. I did say 30 seconds. So I need to hold us. That is almost impossible for all of us because we all have so much that needs to be said. So I need to go around and ask you all for some closing, powerful takeaway statements in 30 seconds. Carl, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to go down my grid, how I say it. Carl, then Ansel, then Claudia, then Herma, then Isaiah. No, I'm going that way. So I'm starting with you and going straight down.
Okay.
Carl, you first, Ansel, then Claudia.
Okay.
30 seconds.
So the key thing to me is, again, it goes back to leadership, voting. We have to get out. We have to vote. We have to get more involved in our communities when it comes to our leadership, but also when it comes to our law enforcement, because if you don't realize, or some of you don't know, so with the police department and the sheriff's office, the police chief is appointed by county executive or by the mayor. So understand that, but the sheriff himself is actually voted on by the people of the county. So leadership is always going to be my key thing. And then it also falls back on training. If you see an officer doing something wrong, don't hesitate to ask him for his name and his ID number, and make sure you get that information into that agency. Don't just call any police department. Make sure you find out what agency they work for and you get that information in there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Delancey.
One thing I have to say is, I've worked with white officers. I've been on 29 years now. So I worked with a lot of white officers. And some of them are the best people you want to work with. They care about the community that they work for. They don't live in the community, but they care about it. I was seeing people who were shot on the street. And as soon as they get on there, they get out their first aid kit and start tending to the people that are shot, trying to save their lives. And then we want to go ahead and get the bad people that committed this crime. So just don't think that just because they're white that they're bad. They're not. They're not. They've been to my house several times. And okay, let's go.
Great perspective. Thank you. I needed to hear that. Thank you. Claudia.
Man, so much has been said. I think the one thing that I would add is that one thing our church members could actually do is go to court hearings. A lot of times, one way to stop harsh sentences is if judges and juries can see that an individual has a community that cares about them. So even if we don't know the individual, if we just completely pack out courthouses, then I truly believe and know and have seen in studies that we can help some of our young Black men get much lower sentences.
Thank you. Thank you. Irma, 30 seconds.
Okay, I'm going to need 40 seconds.
30 seconds, Irma.
30 seconds. Okay. All right, the clock is ticking. We need to end the police militarization, right? As you mentioned voting, but we need to make sure that we're focusing more than just the presidential race. We need to know who's running for the local offices and know who they are. And then I'm going to end on this controversial note. Good cops, bad cops. I'm kind of tired of that phrase, good cop, bad cops. And here's why. We need to think about how we're defining good cops, because there's a police subculture that keeps bad cops on the force, right? And some good cop must have witnessed the misconduct of bad cops over the years. And, when you think about shocking, 18 years, 19 years on the force, 18 complaints, some good cop must have witnessed the misconduct. And if you think about, in reasonable standards, reasonable legal standards, we think that citizens would be responsible to report a crime. In religious community, if you see mistreatment, you are not a good Samaritan if you do nothing. So are you a good cop if you see misconduct and you don't do anything? Good cops need to start speaking up. And I think if good cops did more, we could turn this thing around.
Thank you. Thank you. If we're late for Sabbath school, it's the superintendent's fault. Let's go now. Let's go, Isaiah.
Oh, we're going to end that one today. So
pass along.
I agree with Dr. Herma when she talked about socio-political dynamics to policing. And in my ignorant civilian perspective, I say that we have a value issue. It's generally anything that you hold to value, you protect it. And right now, Black men are not being valued in this country, and it's demonstrated with the way that we are protected. When something happens to them, there is no consequence for the police. So I think by increasing the consequences for accidental deaths and accidental killings and police brutality, if the consequences were increased, then you show a level of value for what you are trying to protect. And I think when it comes to black men, we just need to increase the level of value that we have in the way that we look at black men and how valuable they are to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Pastor Wash.
So just two things quickly. I don't understand why you can be a black person in this country, but you're not registered to vote. If anything, out of respect for people that went before you, who were killed, hosed, lynched, etc., man, that you are a black person in America and not registered to vote is beyond me. So, and not just registered, but actually go voting. So voting as well as educating yourself on who you're actually voting. Don't just start pushing numbers, but educating yourself on who you're voting for. So education as well as voting.
Powerful. Thank you. Doc Brown.
Yeah, I was trying to say 4A's quickly. First of all, anger. And we need to validate anger and recognize that it is an important and significant part of this equation. And this weekend is National Day of Mourning and Lament for COVID, and it can also include the George Floyd situation. Accountability as preachers, we need to recognize our part. And Luke 4:18, Jesus himself said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." We have to call individuals to accountability or to justice. Then there are allies to recognize that we are not in this thing by ourselves. Pastor Dwayne spoke about the non-blacks, but also I speak about blacks all over the world who are supportive. And lastly, advocates. We need people outside of ourselves. In our situation in England, when we had the Stephen Lawrence death in the 1990s, we had individuals like Nelson Mandela and the Daily Mail newspaper that went out on a limb to fight for this thing and ended up changing police tactics. So we need Esthers today, individuals who will say, this one thing I do, I have come into the kingdom for such a time as this.
Thank you, Doc Brown. Pastor Esmond?
We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers, evil, spiritual wickedness in high places. I don't mean to spiritualize this thing, but I believe that the Holy Spirit is the power behind civil justice. And so for me, I think it's critical, one, that before you move, you pray. I think you need God, and then I think you need the revolutionary guidance of that Palestinian named Jesus Christ. I think we need him. And then when you get up off your knees, I think you need to put your work clothes on and you need to get in the fight. You need to enlist. So for me, I don't think we should move an inch without the faith that got us this far. It's going to carry us home.
Mercy, mercy. Thank you, Pastor. Attorney David Ralph. We know that attorneys talk in 15-minute blocks. Herman took a lot of time, so we're going to give you 60 minutes, not just 30 seconds.
Thank you. She did
60 seconds.
He yields his time back to me.
No, I do not. Anyway, seriously though, I think passion is a great, powerful thing. But passion without a plan, that just leads to anarchy. What you want to have is passion with a plan. And that plan of action needs to be, how do I, where do I, like you said, Pastor, what do I use my passion for this summer? Look, we have important elections, both federal, state, local elections coming up. If you want to make change, if you really want to make change, put that passion into a plan of action. As someone else said, educate yourself on who you're voting for. Vote for change is who you're, and make sure you exert your passion in that way. That's how you bring about change.
And more of us need to run for office. I had to put that in there.
Thank you for that powerful point. Pastor Williams will close us out this section. He'll close us out here. Your final statement, Pastor Williams.
Non-engagement, marginalized, sidelining, and aloofness. To be angry and not do anything is to just vent. We need venting to be productive. And Pastor, I've had my Census Bureau envelope on my desk for the last 2 months. I heard you in your sermon. I will fill out that census form and turn it in. I heard you.
All you got to do is go online. It takes more
Online.
than 2 minutes. Online is the best way, the fastest way to get it
Absolutely.
done. And for many of us,
Either way.
we have a primary coming up next week. We all got our mail-in ballots that we all can respond to and need to respond to them immediately taking place. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this important discussion today. I want to thank the pastoral staff, Pastor Washington, Claudia Allen, Pastor Esmond, Pastor Williams, Dr. Brown, for insisting that we go in this direction and for pulling me off the cliff, off the ledge, back into this. I thank you for that. For our guests that are on with us today, to Carl, to Ansel, Herma, David, your presence has made a significant difference in this conversation moving forward. We're going to keep this and record this. We will be broadcasting this service over and over again. Hopefully it'll be rebroadcast today early. We're getting text messages from individuals all across the country who are asking for the entire service, and we want to make sure that it's available to them. Thank you to Sheldon and for Robert and Jasmine and Chaplain Grant for all that you are doing behind the scenes to work through our dilemmas today, especially when the systems crash. We praise God for your ministry in helping us to move forward. Again, we want to be proactive. I'm praying that when this program is over, that you and your family, those in your community, you will have action conversations. You will ask yourselves, okay, what are we going to do that's different moving forward from this day? And if you need to talk to anyone here, if you need to reach out for more resources, reach out to them. If you want to know about other policing issues, talk to our law enforcement agency. They can explain to you how it is that law enforcement can bust into Breonna Taylor's house and kill her. We need an explanation for that. How does that work when you go to the wrong place and make those decisions? Talk to them about it and so many other critical issues that we have talked about today. We thank you again for being with us, and we pray that God will bless you. God will bless the families who have lost loved ones this week in such brutal ways. God will bless the over 100,000 people who have lost their lives to COVID. God will bless the over 42 million people who are unemployed, and many of them in our own communities, that God will sustain and keep them as we move forward. I have no announcements to give. Anything that you want to know, we've already said it. It's on our website. You know Sabbath school is coming up. You know that there's another COVID conversation for couples coming up at 3 o'clock. These things you already know. I just ask you to stay connected, stay the course. May God bless you. I don't know who is scheduled to close us out in prayer, but in the name of Jesus, I want to say to you, I'm done.
Let's bow our heads and pray. Oh God, we have expressed, you've heard our heartfelt ideas, thoughts, passions, convictions. And I pray today, oh God, that you will bless us to move from those to doing something. May we be our brother's keeper. Help us to care enough to get engaged, to do something and get involved. You've heard all of the discussions, and Lord, I pray today that you will make us a productive body of faith that will make a difference in this world, to be the salt, to be the light. And until then, oh God, I pray that you will help us to have sustainable passion to make a difference. And Lord, today, I pray that, God forbid, I pray that there is no lack of empathy within the body of Christ. May that empathy, may that compassion forward us on to change what we have seen happen in this society. And so until then, Lord, bless and keep us. We thank you today for a forum to be real. And we thank you for calling us to make a difference on planet Earth. We give this situation to you. And we pray for all of the families that are grieving. Oh, the grief is insurmountable, God. We just ask that you will walk with them and talk with them and bless our efforts in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.